What's up? What's up? What's up? We back. It's been a little while since we recorded, but we've got another one for you. This is Perfectly Paired With, a podcast that features my lovely wife here, Katie, telling me a story about true crime that she'd probably be telling me anyway. And yeah, got to have a drink for that. So we decided, hey, why don't we record a podcast and you tell me a story and we pair a drink with it, and we drink while you're telling me, and we conversate and talk about different aspects of what the story has. Sometimes we end up down rabbit holes. Who knows what's going to happen? But that's what this is. It is exactly what we'd be doing anyway on a Friday night, and we decided to record it. So, Katie, can you give us a little tidbit on what we're going to be talking about?
On July 22nd, 1968, a group of women sat down to play bridge in a cabin nestled in a wooded area near Lake Michigan. As play moved between the battling pairs, the women could not help but notice a foul stench coming from outside. When the smell became so putrid that the game couldn't continue, the women decided to call a man named Chauncey Bliss. He was the groundskeeper of the Blisswood Resort area, which is where the cabin was located. Chauncey Bliss responded to the women's report, and as he approached another cabin, this one belonging to the Robison family, he honestly believed the horrible smell was most likely due to a dead raccoon that had crawled into the crawl space before dying. Bliss would begin to question that belief, however, as upon approach to the front door, he noticed bullet holes in the window, the glass around each hole fractured. On the door, Bliss registered a handwritten note which read, "Be back by 7-10, Robison." Then, upon entering the cabin, it became clear that the smell of death in the air was not the result of a dead raccoon, but rather the deaths of all 6 Robison family members, each lying dead on the floor in their own pool of blood, flies swarming the inside of the cabin.
Wow. I didn't expect 6 dead bodies all in one family in one cabin. Where's the cabin at again? Sorry, I was thinking about like 20 different things when you started.
So it's on Lake Michigan in like a vacationing community called Blisswood.
Is it upper?
Yes. So it's north west Michigan.
Mitten? Upper Mitten?
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, not perfect that they died. God rest their souls.
But perfectly paired with?
But perfectly paired with. Something that I found. So I think you told me they're from Detroit.
Yeah, they're from a suburb of Detroit called Lathrop Village.
And I got excited about this because I've got a lot of family from Detroit. My mom's from Detroit, my grandpa, and yeah, just that whole side of family. I couldn't find anything from Detroit here, Colorado, at our giant liquor store, which is surprising. There's some decent things out there in my research, and couldn't find anything. But I did find something from Michigan.
Okay.
And it comes from, give me a second.
He's back.
Traverse City.
Okay.
Which is around where you're talking about.
Okay.
On Lake Michigan. It's the north side of the Mitten there. And it's Traverse City Whiskey Company. Now, before you get kind of down that we got another whiskey.
If you don't listen often, my husband will take any opportunity to choose a brown liquor, preferably whiskey or bourbon.
Yeah. Have I even chosen anything else besides whiskey or bourbon? Like brown liquor wise? I don't think I have.
No, I think it's probably all that.
Yeah, it's pretty much all I know. So it's a limited edition. Okay. I don't know how limited because there's a lot of bottles there, but it is infused with Michigan apples and natural flavor.
I bet it's going to be delicious.
There we go. I got her excited
you know
about
what?
bourbon.
Fall is in the air. You mentioned apples. I feel like it's
that's kind of what I
Perfect.
thought. And I tell you, I held both bottles in my hand, the regular bourbon
Yeah.
and this one, and everything in me
No, go with the
with
apples.
my
Always
taste
the
buds wanted to go
apples.
with the bourbon. And I just was like, you
No,
know
because
what?
we can have an opinion about this one.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, I love you, so I want you to be happy. And it's our anniversary tomorrow, so I might as well make you
Yeah.
happy tonight.
Our golden anniversary, perfectly paired with a golden whiskey. Looks
Yes.
gold.
It is. It's a bit golden. All right. Got some ice here. You hear some rumbling.
ASMR.
And I'll pour this bourbon into this cup.
Free pouring, which is either a good sign or a really bad sign.
Give you a fair share. Now, you need to remember to actually drink this while you're telling the story, because I always have to remind you.
I know.
I feel like...
Let's see how it tastes before I agree.
I feel like people...
Cheers.
Sometimes it's...
Happy golden anniversary tomorrow.
Yes. Happy golden anniversary.
You can smell the apple. Like, it's absolutely whiskey, but you can smell a hint of apple.
Yeah, you can. I thought it'd be a bit stronger, but I feel like my taste buds are nose buds.
Well, you can smell it. I don't know if you can taste it. I guess it's there a little bit.
Oh, that's not bad. Yeah, you're right. It the whiskey comes through a lot more, but there is
The whiskey comes through, and then
there's this
when
subtle
you're done
sweetness to it.
swallowing,
Besides
there's a taste of apple.
besides the sweetness of bourbon, there's a hint of something over it. Oh, I'm sorry, it's not as much as you were hoping for. Hey, but at least remember.
I just took like a teeny tiny bit and swirled it around on my tongue, and my tongue did not like that. So excuse me for coughing.
It made you cough?
Yeah, it did. Whew.
Interesting.
Sorry.
Well, at least it's
Sorry,
not.
folks.
Do you remember when we did our Jack Daniels Advent calendar?
Yeah.
So we had
Yeah.
a different Jack Daniels for each day, little shooters.
Yes.
Remember the apple Jack Daniels?
I liked that one.
No, I
Yes,
swear
I
that was
did.
the one that we hated more than
No,
anything.
we hated the rye. They had like a
Oh,
rye.
you're
We
right.
hated that. The apple one was good. This is
The apple was super sweet. I wasn't.
This is nothing to complain about. It is definitely whiskey heavy, but if you're buying whiskey, you want whiskey heavy with just the subtlest hint. I never go whiskey heavy, so I'd like a little more apple, but this is fine.
Good.
It's tasty.
Good. And as a whiskey, I guess, connoisseur of sorts, I would recommend this to anybody because it's kind of nice. The more you have, you actually do smell that apple as you bring it to your mouth, your nose.
There's a freshness to it that you don't find with other whiskeys, for sure.
So it's perfectly balanced there, which is perfectly paired with a great story.
So a apple-infused whiskey from Traverse City, Michigan is perfectly paired with a story from Michigan that, just like the apple inside of a whiskey, will have surprises you're not expecting. So the Robisons were an average, happy family living in Lathrop Village, which was a wealthy suburb of Detroit, Michigan. Richard was the head of the Robison household. He ran a successful advertising agency called R.C. Robison and Associates. He also published Impresario, which was described as a cultural magazine.
Did you say insurance agency?
Advertising. He's an ad man.
Ad man. All right, cool.
Yes.
Just like a dude from Mad Men?
Yes.
Got it.
His wife, Shirley, was a homemaker who took care of the 4 Robison children. Richie probably didn't need a lot of taking care of. He was the oldest Robison child. He was actually 19 years old and a student at Eastern Michigan University. Gary was 16, Randy was 12, and the only daughter was 8-year-old Susan. The family planned on spending the summer of 1968 at their seasonal home in the Blisswood Resort community, which was located in Goodhart, Michigan. There, the Robisons owned a cabin that sat along the shore of Lake Michigan. Their cabin, which was purchased in 1958 for a whopping $15,000, was rather remote. Its specific location made it nearly impossible to see from the road due to all the tall pines and dense woods running along the backside of the home. So on June 6th, another source cited June 16th, 1968, the Robison family headed to the lake. While away that summer, Richard's business associate, Joe Scalaro, was put in charge of the advertising company. In fact, Joe had basically been running the business for the previous 3 months, as Richard had been busy flying around the country working on a new business venture. Richard had been dropping hints to friends and family that he was on the brink of finalizing a really big deal, one that would make him, in his own word, a tycoon.
Wow.
Actually, one of his new business associates, a Mr. Roberts, was supposed to be flying into Michigan on his personal Learjet, no less, to spend some time with the Robisons at their cabin. And then this Mr. Roberts was planning on traveling with the family south later that summer. During their stay at the Blisswood cabin, the Robisons had told their neighbors that they were indeed planning on leaving at some point to take a trip south. First, to stop in Kentucky to look into buying a horse farm, and then to Florida, where they planned on scouting out beachfront condos.
In Florida? Where? Any idea? Just Florida?
No.
That's a lot of Florida.
Yes. Now, on June 24th, while still at their cabin, Richard, the head of the Robison household, visited the son of the caretaker in charge of the Blisswood Resort area, a man named Moni Bliss, to share his condolences. You see, Moni and Chauncey, his father, were not only the caretakers of the cabins in that area, but also the men responsible for their construction many years earlier. And Moni that summer had experienced a tragedy. His 18-year-old son, Norman, had died unexpectedly. Norman had left the Legs Inn, which is a local place in Cross Village, and while impaired or under the influence, he crashed his motorcycle and died. Since the family was planning on leaving for Kentucky, they would not be able to attend the funeral, despite the fact that Norman was a friend to the Robison boys. Before leaving the Bliss residence, Robison also gave Bliss's wife $20 for flowers, and then he left for his own cabin. Now, perhaps it was because of the looming possible purchase of a horse farm or a beachfront condo, but the next morning, which would have been June 25th, Richard called the National Bank of Detroit to confirm a $200,000 deposit that should have been made. However, upon speaking to a bank associate, Richard learned that this deposit never took place. In fact, it seemed like a significant amount of money was missing from the business account altogether. Now, after hanging up with the National Bank of Detroit, Richard called his business associate, Joe Scalaro. As it would turn out, Joe was responsible for embezzling roughly $60,000 from the advertising business. Now, whether Richard discovered exactly what was going on with that call with Joe that morning, I'm not sure. But what is certain is that Joe was writing himself checks to steal money, and on that day in June, Richard had several reasons to be suspicious.
Okay, so Richard expected the 200,000 to go through for a business thing that they're doing. It didn't go through. He calls and they say, yeah, it never was made. And also there's money missing.
Yes.
And now he's talking to, or he's trying to talk to.
He is talking to the man who's basically been running the business for over 3 months.
Okay. And then does Joe just fess up to it?
I don't know what transpires between their conversation, but I think what is clear at the end of it, Richard has every reason to suspect that Joe is mishandling business funds.
Okay. All right.
So, after speaking with a very angry Richard Robison, Joe Scalaro left the office at around 10:30 a.m. and never returned. For the next 12 hours, Joe was completely out of contact with everybody. Now, for the rest of the day, the family seemingly went about their normal business. At around 4 p.m. that evening, tree trimmers left the Robison property. Those tree trimmers would be the last people to see the family alive. Well, the last except for those who would be responsible for the Robison family deaths. Later that night, a couple, about a quarter of a mile from the Robison cabin, heard what they thought to be gunshots, accompanied by 2 raised male voices and the voice of a woman. Chalking the shots up to someone shooting gulls on the beach, the couple never called to report the sounds, nor did they venture out to investigate any further.
Shooting gulls on the beach?
Seagulls.
Oh.
That's my seagull.
When you say shooting gulls on the beach, I think of like a sport. Shooting, like it was a hockey. Someone's hitting a puck.
Goals. No.
Yeah.
Goals.
Shooting
like
seagulls on the beach.
Yes.
Yes. I guess that's commonplace when you live by the lake.
Yeah.
Michigan.
Then, for about a month, no one saw or heard from the Robison family. But considering that they had been telling people they were planning on traveling south, no one seemed too concerned. That was until that fateful, stinky bridge game. So on July 22nd, nearly a month after the last time the Robison family had been seen alive, Chauncey Bliss, the groundskeeper, the one who was alerted to the stench in the air.
A month?
Almost a month.
Yeah, it was just like making sure I heard that.
It was
right.
June 25th to July 22nd. So not quite a month, but almost.
Look me. Oh, man.
Now, after finding the 6 dead bodies, he called police. And from the beginning, the investigation was problematic.
So this guy finds bodies that have been dead for over a month.
Almost a month.
Well, oh, yeah.
And apparently
about a month. And
the cabin was just swarming with live flies. There were dead flies all over the ground.
Is that because you said that the family that owns
they own the cabin. The Robisons own the cabin.
Got it. Oh, so yeah, and it's remote and
and they said they weren't going to be around, so nobody bothered to check. And so
a month's a pretty long time, though. I would think that they would like make that very specific. Like
it would come up in the investigation as to why nobody seemed to notice that both cars were in the driveway. They were like accumulating a layer of pollen.
Right.
The smell was pretty significant early on, and nobody seemed to check.
That's crazy because you said that people had reported the smell.
Just that the bridge ladies who were having a weekend of bridge fun.
Oh, so they hadn't been there they were just there for a weekend.
They were just there for a weekend.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So there's literally nobody around to like walk by and be like, wow, what's that smell? Oh, these cars look like they haven't moved for a while.
And I mean, you're in the wilderness, right?
Yeah.
Things probably die and stink.
Jeez, a month. That is...
Now, with regards to the investigation, the local sheriff, a man named Richard Zink, was actually out of town. He took his family on a trip to Yellowstone, and it apparently was his first family vacation in nearly 8 years. So it's not like he was going to ditch his wife and kids to come home for the early days of this investigation.
No, he didn't want a divorce.
No. The undersheriff, he didn't want to be pushed into the Yellowstone guys. That's what he didn't want. Now, the undersheriff had only 1 month of experience. And after he walked into the cabin, the scene of the crime, he actually found a hammer, which he promptly picked up and then proceeded to wipe clean.
Come on, man.
I know.
This is late 50s?
68.
Oh, for some reason.
Yeah, you still shouldn't.
58, but
wipe
68.
What's most
Yeah, no. Yeah, you should know better.
Yes. Now, the investigators did note there was a partially packed suitcase inside, as though the family was planning on leaving the cabin at some point in the near future. There were also playing cards on the table, which indicated that the family, on the night they were killed, were in for the night, simply enjoying their evening. The investigators were able to recover 15 shell casings from the scene, 11 belonging to a .22 caliber rifle and 4 belonging to a .25 caliber handgun. It was also determined that an expensive ring was missing, along with some cash, but there were plenty of other valuable items left behind, calling into question robbery as a motive. Not to mention, since you couldn't see the cabin basically from anywhere except at the cabin, it most likely was somebody who knew the cabin was already there.
Yeah.
Now, the investigators found one set of bloody boot prints inside the cabin, which they actually cut out a sample from the wood floor to preserve as evidence.
Well, that's good. I imagine something like that and whatever other evidence they have, but the shell casings
Are important.
Those are weird calibers. 24, like that. It's not. I don't know about back then, but I imagine it's just like now, like not very common. Only certain guns are made with that. So, yeah. All right, go on.
In general, though, it was difficult to collect any evidence from the bodies of the victims due to their advanced state of decomposition. The bodies had laid in the cabin in the hot July temperatures for nearly a month. And to add to that, according to one source, the heat had actually been turned up within the cabin, accelerating the rapid decomposition.
Oh.
Now, the autopsies of the victims were to be done at the hospital in Petoskey, but due to how badly the bodies were decomposed, the hospital refused to accept them. So the first round of autopsies of the 6 Robison family victims were performed in a chicken coop at a local fairground.
I was going to leave you some silence there. I don't want to do that to listeners, but I literally don't know what to even say to that.
Isn't that awful?
What? Why? What? Huh?
The hospitals
How?
wouldn't
What?
take them
Who?
because they were so decomposed.
So,
Chicken coop it is.
no coroner? Like, that's not how things go today.
So it's an incredibly small town. Good heart.
So call the bigger city.
No, that's what
What
happened.
the hell?
All right. So here's what the police found at the scene of the crime. Investigators believe that around twilight on the evening of the 25th, the killer, who they believe to have acted alone due to the single pair of bloody footprints, approached a window near the front door and fired multiple .22 caliber shots into the living room, where Richard Robison, who was relaxing in an easy chair, was shot in the chest. Then they believe the shooter burst through the front door, while the other Robison family members, who were assuredly in shock, tried to respond to that initial assault. Investigators concluded that the 2 oldest boys, who most likely were the 2 who had been playing cards at the table, retreated to a back room in order to retrieve the family's own rifle, which would have been stored in a back closet. Richard Robison, who would be incapacitated before the 2 boys could get to the family rifle in time, was shot again multiple times in his head with a .25 caliber round. No, will you go back? Richie Robison, who is the oldest Robison child, would be incapacitated before he could get to the family rifle in time. He was shot multiple times in the head with .25 caliber rounds. His body would be discovered lying in the northwest bedroom.
Jeez.
Gary, the 16-year-old Robison boy, was shot twice in the head with .25 caliber shells. His body was found partially laying in the back bedroom with his legs protruding out into the hallway. After Gary's second autopsy, hopefully this one was not done in another chicken coop, a .22 caliber slug would be recovered, indicating that he had been shot with both the rifle and the pistol.
Who? I thought the whole family's was done.
Yep, but that was his second autopsy.
Oh, second.
So I have a feeling they were like, did it in a chicken coop? Probably doesn't
not
count.
Good.
Let's get these bodies to the morgue. I don't know.
Because they called the bigger city to investigate this because they botched everything in the small, tiny town trying to do it themselves.
And the guy was like, well, my wife/cousin said it would be fine.
Yeah. What the fuck? Like the dirtiest place you could find?
At a chicken coop, just a bunch of chicken crap everywhere.
Just find like, I mean,
oh my gosh, this guy's
like
eye is missing. What happened to that? Oh, that was just one of the chickens.
Yeah. Go to even a mechanic's garage. Just like, hey, clean up this spot here.
There's a whole lot of other places that are better served to do an impromptu autopsy. Now, one resource stated it was likely that 12-year-old Randy had been killed with one of the rounds that were shot through the window. But at some point after his death, Randy's body was dragged into the hallway and placed on top of his father's body. Now, 8-year-old Susan, who was shot once in the face with a .25 caliber firearm, also was beaten with what was most likely a hammer, causing her to sustain several skull fractures.
Could have been the butt of a gun?
No, it was a hammer. It was a claw hammer. The one that the undersheriff proceeded to clean the moment he found it.
Oh, that's right. The cleaning of the hammer.
Yes.
By the sheriff of the town.
Well, the undersheriff.
That
was
decided
incapable.
to do. Suspicious.
Now, besides the gunshot wound...
Why would you clean the hammer? I don't understand
have no
this.
idea.
Why would you, as law enforcement, I mean, not even that much training would take for you to look at a bloody hammer, bodies all around, and say, I shouldn't touch that.
Right.
I definitely shouldn't clean it off. You said on his pants?
It didn't say, but I picture
That's
it
all
on
I'm
his
imagining. I was imagining on his thigh. He's just like, oh,
They did autopsies.
What a tragedy. Such a good hammer having blood all over it.
Let's be real.
Too dirty.
They did autopsies in a chicken coop. He probably licked the hammer clean. Like, that's the level of incompetence, I feel. Like, what is this? Oh, that's blood.
Gotta wipe that off. Where'd that blood come from?
Now.
Oh, over there. Dang. Probably shouldn't have wiped that off. Sorry, sir.
Fooled. Now, besides the gunshot wound to Richard's chest, this is Richard, the head of the household, the shooter followed up with an additional gunshot wound, this time with the .25 caliber firearm. Richard also suffered blunt force trauma to his skull after being struck with the hammer. Then his body was dragged into the hallway, and then he had his children's bodies kind of placed on top.
You said this time with the 25, but he's been using the 25. But you said
it's been going back and forth. So the initial assault was with a rifle. Oh, Richard was shot with a rifle.
Which was what? The 22?
Yes.
Okay.
And then he was shot again with a pistol. And then he and his daughter were the only two family members to be beaten with the claw hammer, which is interesting to me.
Ran out of bullets, maybe?
That's interesting. I mean, the daughter was shot in the head and then beaten with a hammer.
How many times was Richie, the son,
It
shot?
Was multiple. I think it was twice.
Okay. And I could be wrong. We can ask people that know better after this to know if I'm talking nonsense. But while I refill my whiskey, I'm going to talk about it. I think a .25 caliber is in revolvers. I could be wrong on that, but
it's a Beretta. It gets determined, I think, to be a Beretta.
A Beretta. Ooh. Well, I know. I don't know if they make revolvers. We have a Beretta, actually.
Now, Shirley, who is the mom of the Robison clan, her body was found lying on its stomach in the southeast corner of the living room. Her skirt was found pulled up, and her underwear were down around her ankles, indicating that most likely she had been sexually assaulted. Her cause of death was a gunshot wound to the head. Now, this was from one report. There were also several strange puncture wounds in her sanitary napkin, which is like a menstrual pad, indicating that the perpetrator had...
Sanitary napkin?
Yeah, and it had like puncture wounds in it.
But no, this phrase is
that's like, what they were called back in the day.
Like a Tampax pad?
But it's a sanitary
napkin. It's such a more proper way of describing.
I think it sounds disgusting.
It really does kind of like it. Like, come on, let's just call it what it is. But
it definitely is what a woman in the 60s would say. I don't think she'd ever be like, "That's my pad."
I wonder if that's what they advertised.
Demure.
Sanitary napkins.
Now, this indicated that the perpetrator had an additional weapon on him. I mean, it's possible the daughter was shot in the head and then beaten with a claw hammer.
Well, maybe.
Or could be either way. We don't know the sequence because the decomp was so significant.
Yeah, that's true.
But she did have a gunshot wound to the face.
But it is interesting that he used the claw hammer. And I would think that would mean he was running out of bullets, or he ran out of bullets. Maybe he shot her in the head. If she was last to die, shot her in the head, and she didn't die. And he was like, fuck, I gotta make sure this is ended. Finds the claw hammer.
Well, and I mean, she was the least threatening to him. She was the smallest. So I can see her being saved for last in terms of killing the other family members first. And if that is true, how completely terrifying for this young 8-year-old girl to watch this man murder her entire family, and she's just in the cabin.
It's just
how horrifying.
I agree. It's an interesting thing that he used both. Like,
but then why is he using it on Richard?
Because maybe he wasn't dead.
Shot in the chest and the head, and he's still just kicking.
I don't know. You never know with these things.
You never know how it's going to go. You have to bring that third weapon just in case.
Maybe he didn't bring it. Maybe it was out. I don't know. Maybe they're building something. But
well, keep that in mind. Because a hammer definitely should belong to a builder.
He could have brought a rifle and a revolver and thought that would be enough and didn't bring extra bullets, or maybe he did and he was also just didn't want to reload. It's I guess the hammer to me is a little more crime of passion.
Mm-hmm. That's what I think is interesting. Why Richard?
But why
and why the daughter Susan?
Yeah, and that's where I'm kind of like, it's not like you wouldn't have something against one, and the other. Like it would be one or the other.
Now, Shirley, who is the mom, her body was found lying on its stomach in the southeast corner of the living room. Her skirt was found pulled up, and her underwear was down around her ankles, indicating that most likely she had been sexually assaulted.
Jeez. Her
cause of death was a gunshot wound to the head. Now, there was one report that read there were several strange puncture holes in her sanitary napkin, which is like a menstrual pad.
They call it a sanitary napkin?
Yeah, because they were cutesy and demure.
They were proper.
Yeah.
We don't call it what it is.
A pad, yuck.
A bleed pad.
It's a sanitary napkin.
Oh my goodness. Sanitary let's bring it back.
Okay.
Come on,
say that
Tampax.
to your
Bring
teenage
it back.
daughter.
Sanitary napkin. Oh, don't talk about it. Ew.
Now, this indicated that the perpetrator had an additional weapon on him, which is there's a rifle, a pistol, a hammer, and then a puncturing device.
Oh.
Which just, in my mind, after we've been talking about it, I see this montage like in a Rambo movie where he grabs his rifle. He grabs his pistol. He finds a hammer. He gets like a long, skinny metal thing. And he's just like, I'm ready to go murder a family.
Device.
Yeah.
So it's not a knife.
No.
And it's not the hammer.
Correct. And that's really all that's mentioned. But I think it's valid because I corroborated it in another source saying that 4 weapons were used.
Is it a paper like hole puncture thing? The little
no,
you put, back in the day when we were in school, a hole punch. There we go.
No, I think it was like, I picture it like a weeding tool that's like long metal and you just stab it. Like you get under the weeds. I don't know. I don't know.
You mean like crochet type weave? What do you
I
mean?
said weeding, but a crochet needle is
weeding.
a better
I thought you said
connection.
weaving.
No,
my bad.
I did actually. I said weaving. It's a crochet needle. That makes
you
so
meant
much
weeding.
Weeding, like what you.
To get the weeds.
Yeah,
out.
but a crochet needle is so much better.
Oh, either way, it's very strange, and that must have been a strange rabbit hole to listen to.
It was. Yeah, sorry about that. Now, after Shirley's death, the perpetrator showed some signs of remorse because he laid a plaid blanket on her body so that only her lower legs were showing when investigators finally showed up.
And just in case everybody's confused why we kept going on to puncture things, it's because of puncture holes in the sanitary
napkin. Yeah,
which
and
is
like
also
when would he be doing that? Was it
pad,
prior to? I can't even go
pad.
into it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's incredibly strange.
Yes. Now, once investigators ruled out any crazy locals, they had one person at the forefront of their suspect list, and that man was Joe Scalero. Joe Scalero was actually an amateur marksman who owned firearms that matched the two guns used in the killings, a .25 caliber Beretta pistol and two AR-7 rifles, which used .22 caliber ammunition. But when investigators went to retrieve those firearms, Scalero reported that he no longer had physical possession of them. Scalero said that he had given the Beretta to Robison, who is the head of the family that were just all murdered. Mm-hmm. He then said he gave one of the rifles to his brother-in-law. That rifle would never be recovered. And the other rifle, he said he gave to a friend. That rifle was successfully recovered. However, when it was tested...
there was 3 guns used?
So he owned those 3 guns.
And he had no guns when they came.
Yes. Now... the rifle that was recovered from Scalero's friend, when they tested it against the shells found at the scene of the crime, it didn't match. However, that did not deter investigators. They discovered a private shooting range, which was owned by Scalero's father-in-law, where Joe was known to go shooting. And using a metal detector, they were able to retrieve shell casings that matched those at the scene of the crime.
Look at that.
Now, investigators also retrieved a pair of Scalero's boots that matched the bloody footprints left at the scene of the crime. But when they went to test the boots, there was no sign of blood on them. And in fact, the boots appeared to have never, ever been worn at all. Now, this might have eliminated the shoe print as a piece of evidence tying Scalero to the scene of the crime. Except investigators would discover that Scalero had a strange tendency to buy 2 of everything, meaning he very well could have an identical pair of boots that he could have worn to massacre an entire family before he disposed of them.
And an identical gun.
He had 2 guns, the AR-7s.
Yeah.
What a fun fella.
Seriously. I didn't even know they made AR-7s. That's interesting.
Now, Scalero did provide an alibi. According to Scalero, he had gone to a plumbing convention, and then afterwards he visited a bar called Salamander Bar. Not Scalamander. Salamander Bar, because that's a real word.
Salamander sounds like...
It was Salamander.
Yeah.
I would rather go to a Salamander Bar.
Well, yeah, a Salamander Bar sounds like a scat bar or something. You know, you go for the scat.
Now, this bar was located in the Hotel Pontchartrain, and he simply went there for a drink. Then he did a little bit of shopping, but he was home by 11 p.m., which his wife did confirm. No one could corroborate any other parts of Joe's alibi. But it would be an incredibly tight temporal window for him to leave the office at 10:30 a.m., drive the 5 to 6 hour trip from Detroit to Goodhart, murder a family of 6 around dusk, clean himself up, dispose of the weapons and any other evidence, and then make the return trip home by 11 p.m.
Look, we're talking about late 60s. We're not talking about today where you can like have scientific methods of proving when somebody was killed, at least like within the hours, even a month old. They didn't have that. My guess is they're kind of, winging it a little bit on that, hoping it's within days of when they were actually killed.
The gunshots reported by the neighbor that really placed the time of death being around dusk. My thing is,
even then, how does a month later remember exactly which day it is?
Correct.
And we've talked about it on our podcast, how memories don't serve that well when it comes to these type of things.
Yeah.
And especially if you have a couple different people. Now, do they only have one person?
They're a pair. A pair of people, but...
Oh, because they were at the...
This is the...
Oh, that would... I mean, all right.
This is the time window
they were at the,
where...
Is this the people that were at the... what was it? Crabs?
No, it was Bridge. Those are the people who smelled the dead bodies after a month.
Oh.
There was a couple who heard the gunshots. Remember I said they thought they heard people shooting goals on the beach?
Yeah. Shooting hockey pucks.
If he was responsible, it had to happen that day because this is the day where he was out of touch for 12 hours.
Yeah.
So, but just because it's tight in terms of the timeline does not make it impossible.
No, not at all. And especially if you're going to do that, you're going to immediately try and be around people.
Yes. However, when detectives presented this evidence to the Emmett County prosecutor's office, Emmett County is where the cabins are located, the prosecutor declined to bring charges against Scalaro.
Oh, is that the same county that the sheriff worked for that cleaned off the hammer on his pant leg?
Now, most people believe that Emmett County simply did not want to pay for what would have been a very, very expensive trial. Then, in 1973, an Oakland County prosecutor would bring charges against Scalaro. Oakland County was where the Robison family actually lived. But before Scalaro could be brought to trial, he would take his own life using a Beretta. His body would be found by two individuals who were visiting his office in order to collect a $730 debt that he owed them.
Whoa.
So it was going to be a bad day for Scalaro either way.
I'm guessing murder is weighing heavy on his heart.
Well,
over a $730 debt.
Scalaro left a suicide note for his mother. And this is what he wrote. I am a liar, cheat, phony. Any check that any of the people have with your signature ain't any good because I forged your name to get them off my back. I know I'm sick, but seeking help isn't going to help the ones I've hurt. P.S. I had nothing to do with the Robisons. I'm a cheat, but not a murderer.
Oh, wow. Well, but it's to his mom. Mom, I don't want you thinking me as a murderer. If I were a murderer, that's the one thing I wouldn't want my mom to think I am. I'd be fine with all the others. She's thought of me that way, Mama. As it comes. But I'm not a murderer. And yet, had I murdered somebody, I'd say the same thing. Anyway, let's see what else happens here.
Most people believe Joe Scalaro to be the individual responsible for the Robison murders, but his death is not where the story ends. In February of 1974, a state trooper came upon an abandoned blue 1965 Chevrolet along the M14 highway. This vehicle had Ohio plates, and during the course of a routine search, the trooper discovered something very interesting inside. In the glove box, he discovered a luggage tag that read, Shirley Robison, 18790 Dolores, Lathrop Village, Michigan.
What?
How could Shirley's luggage tag wind up in this vehicle 6 years after the murders and 200 miles from the scene of the crime?
Was Shirley the one that was likely raped?
Yes.
Wow. All right. Well.
Now, history of the Chevrolet revealed...
Also could have been two different people.
But it had her address on it?
At the same time. No, I mean, it could have been what's his bucket
and
this
somebody
guy.
else.
Yeah.
Now, history of the Chevrolet revealed it had been bought new in 1966 at a Toledo dealership. And since the initial purchase, the Chevy had various owners. The ones who could be located did not recall the tag, nor could anyone explain its existence. Begging the question, did the original prosecutor, the one in Emmett County, know something not available to the general public, which is why he failed to prosecute? Could someone other than Joe Scalaro have something to do with the Robison family massacre?
Sure. I mean, at this point, listening to it, I'm thinking with Joe. Yeah.
Well, let's discuss what some other options have come about.
Okay.
Now, for one, locals of the Good Heart area believe it could be Chauncey Bliss, the caretaker himself, who could be the mass murderer. In later years, Bliss was described as having been feared due to his quick temper and his odd behavior. Bliss would roam the woods talking to himself, talking to his dead son, and talking to unknown spirits.
No, really?
Rumors spread that Bliss somehow held the Robisons responsible for his son's death, and he actually was incredibly insulted that the family didn't attend the funeral, not to mention they were given $20 to pay for some flowers.
That's that part is pretty low. I mean, that's kind of douchebaggery right there.
Robison, you douchebag. Now,
God rest your soul.
On top of all of that, one of the murder weapons was a claw hammer, which is exactly the kind of weapon a builder might use. And according to local lore, Bliss's hammer was missing after the murders.
I'm not a carpenter. I'm assuming you've seen a picture of this claw hammer or a claw hammer when doing your research. Is it a regular hammer?
Yeah, it has the thing on the back.
To pull the nails out. Oh, that's called a claw hammer, huh?
I think so.
To me, that's just a hammer.
Oh. Now, Bliss had keys to each of the cabin properties. And according to one area local, quote, you'd get up at 4 a.m. and find him in your kitchen frying eggs, end quote. Oh, silly Bliss.
So he's a partier, you know? He just stays up all night.
There is something to that because apparently the front door was particular in terms of its manufacturing. There was like this wood strap that had to be moved in and out of place from the inside. And the back door was like bolt locked. So whoever killed the family had to have access to keys. So there's something to this local legend that it was Bliss.
That the Bliss family maintained these cabins that they built. They would have access because, I mean, the
Robison. There's no N.
Is it? That's
Robison.
But isn't Robinson spelled the same way?
No, I'm assuming Robinson has an S.
Oh, there's
an N at the end, but not in the middle.
Sorry. Yep. Yeah, no, they're spelled much different. They're probably not going there very often outside of, a few times a year.
And to fry eggs at 4 a.m.
And Airbnb isn't around to like have them have property managers, so you got to have somebody maintain it. No,
I think it makes sense that they
especially in Michigan, the winters are harsh out there. You got to have somebody like winterizing, making sure it's good, and then when the winter is gone, getting it ready for the Robisons to come out. Robison Tussin.
Now, on various occasions, Bliss even shouted, quote, Robison had it coming, end quote. But Robison died in 1980 at the ripe old age of 69. And despite these rumors surrounding Bliss, he was officially cleared pretty early on in the investigation.
Oh.
Now, another name that has been tied to the Robison family murders is John Norman Collins, but listeners might know him better by the monikers the Michigan Killer and the Co-Ed Killer.
Oh, we're tying another one into a serial killer?
Yes. He was responsible for the deaths of numerous young women in the late 1960s in Michigan. He also happened to attend the same university as Richie Robison.
Eastern Michigan.
Yes. But despite these coincidences, Collins was never seriously considered.
Yeah, it sounds like a different MO.
Yes.
I mean, even though there was
the rape. Surely.
but the guns and
Yeah.
all that doesn't sound like a serial killer, unless you're one of those, you know.
Now, there are two more avenues of thought, both of which involve Richard Robison himself. Now, Richard's two businesses, the advertising company and the cultural magazine Impresario, were not doing as well as it might have appeared when looking at the affluent lifestyle of the Robison family. For one, Robison was actually caught billing clients for advertisements that they paid for, but he never actually had run anywhere. Then, to make his cultural magazine seem more legitimate, he was running full-page ads for different clients, but these clients never actually asked to be advertised in his little magazine.
So he's incredibly disorganized and doesn't even know, like,
who
to run ads for.
No. He's intentionally taking money from clients, but then not paying to have them run in different publications. He's keeping that money fraudulently. So, like, let's say I sell whiskey. You're my ad company.
So he cares so much about his magazine that he's just willing to cheat people?
Yes. And I think you need to keep in mind that it's a cultural magazine and that adjective cultural is going to matter in about 7 minutes.
Maybe I'm asking this too early. Tell me if I am. You don't have to answer. Is this magazine his tycoon?
No.
Oh, okay.
It's not.
Great. All right, let's go.
Now, just prior to the murders of the Robison family, Richard actually had an affair, which he did often, with one of his secretaries. Now, she would wind up marrying a wealthy manufacturer with ties to organized crime in Cleveland, Ohio, which the Chevrolet had Ohio plates. Now, she would actually miscarry, and many wondered if Robison was the unborn child's father, not her 70-year-old husband.
Damn. All
now,
right.
These two situations led some to speculate.
Joe Solar.
We're not Joe
right?
Scalaro. We're not talking about him.
Anyway, he's possibly tied to because he's got a name.
He seems like a bumbling idiot to me.
But
I don't think anybody wants him.
That's got a name. That Italian tie.
And possibly, we're going to talk about it. So those two situations I just described led some to speculate that it was a hired hit on the family. Really, the only reasoning behind this theory was that the rifle, which was the murder weapon, was a common or stereotypical weapon for organized crime during that time period. You've mentioned several times that it seems like a strange caliber for a rifle, and I guess it was pretty distinctive, and it was tied to organized crime. I even came across one source that cited an unnamed source who stated Robison owed the mob $12,000 a month, and he had fallen significantly behind on his payment.
Ooh, 12,000's that's a good chunk, especially
during
back
the
then.
60s.
Yeah,
yes,
you could die over that for sure.
Yes. Now I have saved the best. I'd call it a theory, but it's not really a theory. It's just sort of information. For the last.
Is it multiverse?
No, but it will get weird, and then it will get weirder, and it will leave you with all sorts of perplexing questions.
It's multiverse.
So Richard Robison was a strange man, and his strange starts with asking his secretaries to come into his office after work. In the office, he would ask them to lift their skirts and show their legs. Then he would just stare at the legs, maybe fondle them for about an hour.
An hour?
And then it would just be over. And it wouldn't progress beyond that, except for, I'm assuming, the secretaries that he developed affairs with. But what a weirdo. Look at that calf.
Look
at those knee bones.
Things were different back then.
Can I just see your mid leg, please?
Yeah, things were different back then. And
oh my gosh, we have to hire her. I can't wait to see her quads.
Right. I looked at him for an hour.
You got some great legs.
Fondle.
Have a good night.
When you say fondle,
this is what I
the
picture.
legs or is it everything?
Nope, just the legs. Great legs.
That's a fetish.
Some great legs.
That's just a fetish there for sure. And things were different back then. And you hear stories
like it's an excuse.
No.
Things are different.
It's not an excuse. I hear stories like this every now and then from, those days of some misogynist pig.
Yeah.
And I get it. I get the Me Too movement. I get the feminist thing.
Yeah.
I get where we ended up here because men have been awful.
Could you just imagine just standing there with
weird
your
fucking ways?
Skirt, just
right.
Looking at your legs, it'd be horrific.
And you're just like, I just want the job. I want to pay for Billy's baby food. That's all.
How was work today, Mom? It was okay. Got a little weird.
And this is
okay.
Around a time when, we're still within the decade of women starting to work.
Yeah.
It was all of a sudden new to men just being like, well, fuck, we gotta, I could hire all these women for all these bullshit jobs that I used to hire men for. Oh, what could I get away with? It's
a drop in the bucket because it's going to
get
get weirder.
Oh, God.
Now, do you remember that business venture Richard had been pursuing before the summer of 1968? The one that was going to make him a tycoon.
Hold on. Say that. Yeah. Oh, wait. Say it again.
Do you remember that business venture Richard had been pursuing before the summer of 1968?
That was much sexier. I liked that.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Do you want to see my legs?
Please.
Just yoking.
Just Yokovicing. No, yeah, I do.
Okay.
Remember.
Well, according to Robison, he was pursuing a $100 million investment from a group he referred to as Superior Table.
100 million?
Yes.
That's huge.
Yes.
Now. Then?
Yeah.
That's what, $1 billion?
I don't know. Oh. Now, his plan was to use the investment to develop a network of computerized warehouses near airports that would function as cultural centers. In the months preceding the family murders, he would stay at various hotels near airports, and he reportedly would not leave his hotel room for days. Now, what is Superior Table, you might ask? Well, it apparently was a worldwide organization that was in pursuit of peace and unity among all countries on planet Earth. Its CEO was a man named Robert, Robert.
Another fucking R last name.
No, this is a first name, like Robert.
Oh.
But it's Robert without the R.
Can you spell that again so I can understand why it's Robert?
Robert. Now,
it's so fucking stupid.
Now,
Robert. I don't want you to be a Robert.
Richard Robison would wear a St. Christopher medal around his neck with the inscription, quote, Richard, to my chosen son and heir, God bless you, Robert. Leaving some to wonder if the Mr. Roberts, who was planning on visiting the family that summer, was actually Robert, the CEO of Superior Table. Now, before you start asking questions, investigators found a 6-page letter in Robison's office. From Robison to Mr. Roberts. And prior to the Robison family massacre, Shirley is alleged to have spoken to Mr. Roberts on the phone. She had started to become really nervous about his visit. And so her husband, Richard, connected her to this man on a call. And do you know what's weird about how people described his voice, or how she described it and people said this is how he talked? He sounded like a robot. Now,
did he actually use like some sort of, hi, how are you doing?
I don't think that was around in the 60s, but maybe. But one more thing.
I feel like there was...
6-page letter included a chart. And Mr. Roberts...
hold on. What the fuck is a computerized warehouse, first of all? And then functioning as what? Cultural blah, blah, blah. Cultural. What the fuck is a cultural center?
I have no idea.
Especially back then. What's a computerized warehouse?
What is the warehouse housing? And then why are people coming there to sit on a couch and talk about culture? Like, I have absolutely no idea what it is.
What's the computer doing? What's the computer doing? What's it computing? Because computers back then are like, it's like, for our, I don't even know how to, for what we grew up with, with Windows, I don't know what, 5, whatever, little, we had our screen, we had our thing that was like a supercomputer compared to
what I want to point out
60s computers.
To the people who are
took
listening,
up rooms,
who are going to go, computers didn't actually even exist in 68.
Oh, they did.
The first computer came out in 1946.
Yeah. No, but they were like warehouse size.
I don't know what the warehouses are housing. I don't know why they have to be next to airports. And I don't know why people who needed the use of a computerized warehouse would also want to simultaneously sip on Traverse City, Michigan whiskey on a couch covered in plastic, because that's the 60s, talking about art and plays and culture. Nobody's doing that. Because that's what we think of when it comes to culture.
Maybe that meant something different back then. I don't know.
I don't know.
But
I don't know.
Culture, maybe farming. But you did say he wanted to buy
a horse
farm.
No, I think culture is like art, music.
That's more
life.
Yeah, that's more equestrian.
Yeah, so to contribute
cultural?
to the strange, in the months preceding the family murders, Richard Robison would actually stay at hotels near various airports, where he reportedly wouldn't leave his hotel room for like 3-day stretches. So if he is doing business meetings and mingling and trying to get Superior Table to invest in these warehouse/cultural, what is he doing in his hotel room? They don't have Zoom.
trying to hire some people, some women.
Know.
Trying to hire,
Well,
just doing the good old Weinstein tradition.
The leg
there.
test.
Let's come up to my hotel room.
Now
Let's see if you got what it takes to be working for my company.
Now your question about what are these warehouses leads to another question. What the F is Superior Table? Apparently, it is a worldwide organization that was in pursuit of peace and unity among all countries on planet Earth. Now, I'm going to throw another R name at you, and I need you to be okay.
Russia?
No. The CEO was a man named Robert.
Oh, jeez.
Roebert. Now, it is okay for you to, for the moment, confuse Mr. Roberts, who is a possible new business associate, with Robert, because many people think they might be the same person, and here's why.
Oh.
So Robison actually wore a St. Christopher medal around his neck.
Richard Robison.
Yes.
Patriarch of the Robinsons.
Yes.
Okay.
And it was inscribed with the following: Richard, to my chosen son and heir, God bless you, Robert.
That sounds like it either came from his dad or a secret society.
But it's my chosen son, right? So they're not blood related.
Oh, so secret
it's
society.
Chosen, which is where I think this is eventually going to lead us. Now, many people wonder if Robert is actually the Mr. Roberts who was planning on visiting the family at their cabin and then flying the family on his private jet to Kentucky and then Florida.
So Mr. Roberts has flown the family on his private jet. Oh, he's planning.
He's doing business with Richard Robison, trying to get these mechanized warehouses off
the computer warehouse.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, you may think this is ridiculous. However, investigators found a 6-page letter in Robison's office. This was a letter between Robison and the Mr. Roberts, and the 6-page letter included a chart showing Mr. Roberts as a chairman over 5 other investors who all had names like Mr. Blank. Now, I'm going to tell you all of them because they're all just whatever, but Mr. Whatever. And these are the investors of Superior Table. And again, I feel
is Robison one of them?
Nope. This is Superior Table. The Misters. Robison wants their $100 million investment.
Ah, gotcha. Okay.
Now, what's interesting is Shirley Robison, the mother, the matriarch, started to get really nervous about this Mr. Roberts coming to her cabin. And so Richard, her husband, goes, "Oh, Shirley, don't be nervous. Let's get him on the phone and you can talk to him."
How do we know this?
People said, like Shirley said, like Shirley was in contact with her family throughout the summer. Yeah. And she spoke to Mr. Roberts, but apparently his voice was very much like a robot voice.
Oh my goodness.
When she talked to him.
So was it one of those like kid robot things where you type the word in and it was like, "Hi, Mrs. Robinson. I'm doing good. How are you?" I think that's an 80s thing, but
that's why
maybe they had the technology then.
Okay, here's where I start to spiral, and it's really unhealthy. I go, okay, so that's the solution, right? Her husband was insane. There was no Superior Table. There were no investors. He scratched in his own St. Christopher medal all this stuff. He took all these trips, didn't meet with anybody, just stayed in his hotel room. Like Richard Robison had something psychologically wrong with him. And he used one of those devices to speak to his wife. And then I go, in 68, those devices aren't just available to anybody.
What is it?
How does he get that and make it for a telephone call? I mean, telephones weren't even that sophisticated back then. So it's not like he can be in one room having this robot voice talk to his wife. So where would that technology come from? So it's either he's insane and has access to technology he shouldn't have access to, so he can pull off this giant charade of Superior Table, or he isn't insane and something bigger is afoot. And I just don't understand what it is.
And maybe I'm like way off here with my dating, but Stephen Hawkins, right? Stephen Hawkins, that's his name? Hawkins. The scientist.
Yes.
I
watch Big Bang just like most of our listeners, I'm sure.
He had his disease very early in age, Could it have been around this time? And they created.
I don't know.
What if Stephen Hawking is part of this?
Somehow,
and he
I think
is
not.
the person talking.
It's so bananas to me because everything says it's Joe Scalaro, but they won't prosecute Joe Scalaro. Or when evidence didn't seem to match, somehow it magically matched. Oh, we found this secret shooting range where we located using a metal detector shell casings. How many people shoot there? You're telling me you found these and then, oh, these boots don't match, but we know he buys 2 of everything. And just like, I don't know. I can't explain it. And I wanted this to be easy and straightforward because I'm working on something else at the time. And it just isn't. I think about it all the time. So I don't.
I remember you starting doing your research for this, and it was supposed to be one of our just more straightforward, easy ones.
45 minutes.
And you just kept going.
Because
and I was like, hey, are you ready? And you're like, I think, but I don't know. And you just kept going.
Everything I can to find superior table in references outside of this, and there's nothing.
No, nothing. If anything, I don't know how you're going to end it, but if anything, I'm going to look more into this because this is very strange because we're getting into conspiracy.
I know. Well, you can look into it and keep me updated because I got nothing left for the Robisons. I just can't. It's all just weird.
But I don't even know what I was going to say. I mean, at this point, the whiskey's got a hold of me.
All right, I'll wrap it up.
You might as well wrap it up.
Zero answers.
But this is all the info.
That's it. It's all of it.
Really?
Yeah. And it's technically unsolved. And people have their groups. You think it's Joe Scalaro. You think it's the Blip.
I remember what I was going to say. Let me say it before I forget it again.
Finish it.
In cases like these, I often think about the police department handling it. And there's some very suspicious things right at the beginning of this police department handling it. And we don't know how many calls have been made to that area of, hey, it smells awful around here. A month later, those smells are not as bad as they were 2 weeks ago. Like 2 weeks in, hot sun, super hot cabin. It's got no cooling.
I think it's
and they turned up the heat.
Oh my gosh. Okay, here's a side story.
It would
just for
smell
funsies.
so bad. You would smell that cabin like a mile away. Maybe not a mile, but a block away.
Here's what's crazy. Richard Robison's face, the patriarch, was actually on a heating vent. And after investigators came and found the bodies, they noticed smoke in the house. And they're like, what's on fire? Richard Robison's skin had like fallen into the heating vent and was like, on fire.
Just constantly burning.
Yeah.
So
sorry, Richard, but you're a freak with the legs, so I'm okay with that.
He's a weird guy. There's some weird circumstances around. If anything, they set up the perfect murder, but I don't know why get rid of the whole family. Why not just get rid of him? That's where I'm kind of lost on everything.
Right, because even if it's Joe Scalaro, why is he murdering the entire family? That's not going to do him any good. Like, none.
It makes me think maybe there's something else. Well, there's something else that somebody covered up. And that somebody had ties to the police department or county sheriff there.
See,
and they were able to just brush it under the rug.
I think they just took advantage and they're like, we know the family is staying at this cabin and it's in a podunk little town and these officers aren't going to know what to do. So if we're going to act, we should act here as opposed to anywhere else.
Again, why the fuck would you walk into a murder scene, pick up a bloody hammer and clean it off?
I don't know.
makes zero sense. It
All
also
right.
makes zero sense to report that. So maybe it was just a fucking idiot.
All right.
Like, how do we even know about that? Who said, what dude did that and was like, oh, yeah, just wiped it off?
It was the undersheriff. He was in charge.
I know. What, deputy sheriff? That's what we think
The
of him now.
undersheriff.
I don't think there's
know.
any undersheriffs anymore.
All
Deputy
right.
sheriff. Anyway,
Here's
go
the
on.
end. The first Europeans to ever lay their eyes on Lake Michigan called it Lac Dauphine, which means Lake of the Stinking Water.
Stinking water?
Which seems perfectly fitting for a lake, which was a part of the setting for a horrific massacre
Hold on.
of 6 family members.
Before you go on, you can repeat that part.
I will.
Because I plan to tell the story. And if you want to skip it, just skip like, I don't know, 30 seconds ahead. Like I said, my family's from Michigan.
Correct.
Been to Michigan, been on Lake Michigan. We've done a boat tour. I got shat on by a seagull at the age of, I believe I was either 9 or 10 years old, on the boat, just enjoying myself, looking around at the rocks. We were close to the rocks. Seagull shat right on my face.
Okay, so here's my Lake Michigan story. When I was 5, my family took a road trip. It was like 2 weeks. We went to Lake Michigan.
You didn't even laugh at me getting shat. You were like, no, you deserved it.
And the day we were at Lake Michigan, it was a weird tide, and the tide was killing all the fish. And all these dead fish were being brought up onto the sand. And young 5-year-old Katie was terrified. Like, I wouldn't get into the water. I was just grossed out. I was afraid. And when we left, I hated that feeling. And so I was like, I shall never not do something because I'm afraid again. And that came full circle when we went to Michigan. Our first kid was like 6 months old. And that day was like a conquering the giant moment for me because I got in the water.
Yeah.
And now I'm not afraid of water at all. Like,
That's amazing.
love water. But that day, there's even like family video of it. And I've watched it. And I'm just like, who is that scared little girl? Even my little sister is just like playing in the dead fish water. And I was like holding my grandma's hand, holding my grandpa's hand. I wouldn't get in. And from that moment on, I was like, I will never let fear keep me from doing something because I'd rather regret making the choice to do it than looking back and being afraid to have tried. And so when we went to Michigan that day, that was a huge deal for me. It was like a big thing to have my kid and get in the water. And I got in and I even like swam some laps and yeah.
That's I believe you told me that, but it was probably then, which was what, 13 years ago, because we're on our golden, which is 14 years now.
All right, now we're gonna make Lake Michigan sound so gross.
No, I mean all lakes are gross. Lake Michigan is insane, though. When you go there,
yes, but we're not.
You don't see the other side.
Yes.
It's so fucking big. It's crazy. All those lakes around Michigan.
Okay, for those of us
insane.
who are still listening, the first Europeans to ever lay their eyes on Lake Michigan called it Lac Dauphine, which means Lake of the Stinking Water, which seems perfectly fitting for a lake, which was a part of the setting for the horrific massacre of the 6 Robison family members. Now, I say that because eventually the Robison cabin would have to be completely demolished because despite every effort to clean the scene, the smell of death could never be fully eradicated. Now, this demolition would remove the stench of death from the picturesque lakeside scene. But the questions about what happened to the Robison family, well, those will remain forever.
Michigan.
You stank.